What is an IP company? Should you make a change? In this episode, we will cover the power of IP and the power of IP in an IP company. We'll learn how dedicated resource allocation towards patents and trade secrets can establish market dominance and drive innovation. By strategically managing an IP portfolio in an IP company, companies can generate revenue through licenses, royalties, and even IP sales. This approach allows you to form an IP company using things like an IP steering committee, leveraging sophisticated IP tools, building a global network of experts. We'll understand the diverse business models that are available. We'll explore portfolio expansion, strategic partnerships, litigation readiness. We'll uncover the benefits, such as the competitive advantage of enhanced asset valuation and multiple revenue streams. We'll also discuss the world of prototypes, which will help to validate market interest and secure funding and attract media attention. This is John Cronin, Invent Anything.
Inventions keep the world spinning. From fire in the wheel to today's high tech, inventions power change. Turn your inventions into reality. Learn how to get your ideas to market. This is Invent Anything with John Cronin.
So today we'll cover 6 topics. The first topic is, what is an IP company? The second topic is the types of IP company business models. Very important to understand the ways you can make money. We'll touch on a few. Topic number 3 is, once you decide to become an IP company, what do you do? How do you organize for it? And topic number 4 is, now that you're organizing to become an IP company, what's the strategy of an IP company, of which there are many, depending upon the business models. We'll also then jump into topic number 5, which is how monetization works, but especially how prototypes help with monetization. And then finally, we'll wrap up by talking about topic number 6, the benefits of an IP company. And then we'll wrap up. Now, thinking about the audience for, what is an IP company and should you be one? We really thought about this, that most companies and CEOs that I talk to are not really familiar with an IP company. So if you're not, this primer is for you. Another area that might occur for some of the audiences is that for those in companies who want to consider what to do with their IP, you might not know that you can consider an IP company. So this is for you. This is certainly for investors, for companies that have IP, because at some point, a lot of companies fail. Maybe you should trigger that to become an IP company. For those at the decision point of what to do with their IP, not knowing what an IP company is, it wouldn't occur to you. So this is for you. Another thing is, this is new possibilities for companies that have IP to consider this business direction of being an IP company. And then finally, another audience that might enjoy this is for those that study or think about IP strategy. If you've never really thought about an IP company, this will certainly give you a wonderful background of this. Coming up, we're going to learn about IP companies, including how they allocate resources, generate revenue, establish market dominance, and maintain their portfolios. We're going to show how the companies can prioritize their intellectual property as a strategic core to their business. We're going to also talk about how intellectual property enhances their negotiation leverage and partnerships and mergers. We'll explore the various business models of IP and IP companies, things like patent licensing or patent trolls, or how you can do tech transfer, IP trading and brokerage, how you do micro litigation, IP investment funds, managing patent pools, and more. So stay tuned. So let's talk about the first topic, topic number 1. What is an IP company? First thing is, it's a lot about resource allocation. If an IP company, starts to think about itself as an IP company, or any company thinks about itself as an IP company, then all of a sudden a significant amount of resources are going to go into developing and maintaining and finding other ways to monetize IP. So that's one of the indications that you are an IP company, or something that you might need to do if you're going to become an IP company. The next thing, of course, is any company has to generate revenue. So the next thing about what is an IP company is to think about how to create revenues using intellectual property. Now, I have helped start a number of IP companies over the years. I've been in business 26, 27 years. I'm currently chairman of a few companies right now, one of which I might call an IP company, et cetera. But, thinking about revenue generation is vital. Now, if you're an IP company or be trying to become one, you may decide that revenue generation might be secondary until you get the IP generated, which would be a reasonable approach. But another thing about what an IP company is, it's really about market dominance. That is, if it accumulates, the company accumulates a large amount of patents, it could be the major player. And over the years, I have been the pleasure to work with some companies where they went from nothing to the major player of IP. Another thing about IP companies is that it becomes their strategic core. Everything they do is about intellectual property. It becomes the company's cornerstone for business strategy or for driving advantage. So you'll find that IP companies really don't talk about products and services and things. They talk about their IP only. One of the nice things about an IP company is what an IP company becomes is the R&D investment becomes how to do better IP development. And so you might find that you're going to start to develop IP creation tools or develop IP-related investments in hiring the best people in IP, et cetera. So your R&D becomes the R&D of how to develop and monetize IP. One of the things you really get good at in an IP company is developing a stream for licensing and royalties, even selling patents. And that becomes a revenue generator. But there's so much more to what is an IP company, getting that expertise in licensing. In some companies where I've come on board to help, one of the first things we do is hire a licensing executive. One of the things about what is an IP company is that you want to leverage the IP protection. Now, by leverage, we mean that some of the IP might be patents, but some could be trade secrets, some could be enabled publications. We have a lot of podcasts on how to improve IP portfolios. Invent Anything, a podcast series you might take a look at. Another thing about what an IP company is you now have a sort of specific consideration for portfolio management, meaning you're now looking at your IP portfolio as if it was a whole set of different products in a product stream, or if it different services. So you start to look at your IP portfolio in groups and developing portfolios that might be readily sellable now or licensable, and some that might be developed 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now. So you have a new consideration for how to map out a portfolio for IP if you're an IP company. Another thing about IP companies is, if you want to be one, is to think about how to safeguard your IP. Now, this means safeguarding a lot more than just your patents or trade secrets. It means safeguarding your relationships with the people that have helped create the IP, with the legal counsel that you have, that you want to sort of wrap them into a long-term deal with yourself. Also with investors, et cetera. So you really got to safeguard your IP as you impact all the different players of your company. And finally, what is an IP company? It turns out that one of the essences is negotiation leverage. You see, in an IP company, you can pretty much do anything using IP as the leverage point in negotiation. Whether you're going to threaten to litigate or try to license or have PR or some sort of press direction or the fact that you're innovative and you're an IP company. It's all about negotiation and leverage to others. So what is an IP company? It's certainly going to have leverage using IP as a negotiation. Now let's go to topic number 2, the types of company business models for IP. So IP company business models. One might be very simply patent licensing. Here what you're doing is generating revenues through taking some of your patents and licensing them. There's a lot here on how to license patents. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of podcasts we have on just how to develop IP for licensing that you might want to take a look at. Another model, although it doesn't seem as popular, is patent trolling. That means that you don't have products, but you have patents, and you're going to litigate against those companies that have products. So the label that these companies are given, specifically by those companies that have products that don't have patents, they call you patent trolls or non-practicing entities. There's a history here that goes back about 15 to 20 years about non-practicing entities. But clearly, if you're an IP company, you're very likely not to have product or services to sell. You just have patents to leverage. So patent litigation is one of the things of a business model of an IP company. Believe it or not, another business model of an IP company is offering intellectual property, but for license or for sale, but then offering services associated with that intellectual property to help the others that you license to develop their own intellectual property. So doing an IP licensing transaction, they license the IP, but the services side of your company comes in. It helps that entity develop specific IP to their market application. Another business model for IP companies is technology transfer. Here what you're doing is you're sort of thinking about the business of collaborating with partnerships between maybe universities with some institutions, even large companies, to essentially develop IP that you can commercialize. A number of deals we've been involved in was to essentially take IP as the beginning of a relationship with the large company, help them develop a small laboratory around it that they could do prototypes, and then coming back and helping them develop further IP. There's all sorts of variability that you could have in developing these relationships. Another IP company business model is IP trading and brokerage. A cornerstone of an IP company is to help, license or sell patents. But some IP companies that I've worked with actually have another model where they will take in patents from others or trade secrets and patents and become a broker, where they will charge some sort of success fee or licensing fee to broker it. I started a company, I had it for about 4 or 5 years, the IP Capital Licensing Company, where that was the model, where we had several hundred transactions we were following in any one period of time. But we basically sold our expertise in how to license or sell patents. Another business model, which you may not have heard of, is called micro-litigation or contingency financing. And these are kind of related. That someone will come in and offer to litigate your patents where they get a success fee. They want to make sure they get at least 3 to 5 companies they can litigate against. But their whole claim to fame is to essentially do micro-litigation, which is to try to settle early. They're not going to take it all the way. So they literally set up the company to litigate and to settle early. And this goes hand in glove with contingency financing, because these micro-litigators are looking for ways to try to develop revenues to get a success fee. But a lot of times they need an investment in order to get started. So they bring their investors into the micro-litigation, almost like a mini hedge fund, which leads to IP funds. Some of the companies I've worked a lot with over the years are companies that raise $200, $300, $500 million, and they're in business to finance litigation. So we would have many times have patents that we would try to sell into an IP licensing or investment fund, and they would take over from the money side to go find the litigation firm and to finance the litigation. And they clear their fees in and their investment in, and then there's a split in the back end of 60-40 or 70-30 to the original IP holders. Another interesting business model is creating and managing patent pools. An example of a famous one is MPEG LA, where someone comes in and sees the opportunity to organize many, many patents from different players and put it in a patent pool, where a patent pool works out that those players that have lots of patents will get licenses from and revenue from the patent pool. But some players that don't have the patents have to license to them, have to buy from the patent pool, and they may pay different royalty rates. If they put in patents, it's one royalty rate, usually higher, usually lower. And if they don't put in patents, the royalty rates are higher. So patent pools, which then leads to the next IP sort of company business model, is standard essential patents. So companies have been sort of brought up along the lines of trying to look at patents in a particular area, like cell phone technology, understanding what those essential patents are, and then trying to figure out ways to monetize those essential patents. Some companies make, money off of their expertise in understanding what is or what isn't an essential patent. Other companies make money from figuring out how to leverage the fact that they know who has these standard essential patents and how they get access to them. And finally, some companies make money by essentially becoming the orchestrator of the licenses. And finally, one model for IP companies is IP consulting services, like a company like mine or IP Capital. We have over 50 different services that we consult to. So whether it's consulting or licensing or revenue generation or patent pools, I could spend hours and hours and hours talking about all the different business models of an IP company. Notwithstanding, if you want to create an IP company, you can have hybrids of these different business models. So coming up, you're going to learn how to organize and strategize in creating an IP company. This includes forming your IP strategy committee, implementing education and best practices, establishing dedicated IP management and legal teams, developing IP tools, how to have efficient portfolio management, how to do market analysis, how to do license analysis, how to do valuation analysis. And we're going to explore how you can do some other things, like how you can form strategic partnerships for patent portfolio expansion, how you can go from that to making sure that you might be able to do AI to essentially develop very sophisticated CRM systems to go find people to license to. You may even find that you create, partnerships with those folks that can help you keep secret. You may even find that we'll talk about patent monetization strategies that are really crucial for financial engineering and contingency planning and creating an IP company. So stay tuned. So let's go into topic number 3, organizing an IP company. Now, there's very few people that can say this. I've helped organize dozens and dozens of IP companies. I've helped companies develop IP and then find ways to monetize them from the ground up. Or I've come into startup companies that had good IP and helped convince investors that maybe the best thing to do was to start an IP company. In some cases, I've come into IP companies and helped them figure out a little bit more about how to get higher levels of monetization. I work with some of the largest IP companies in the world and found my way to try to help them with some of the things that my consulting service does. So let's just have some basics about how do you organize an IP company. One of the first things is developing an IP strategy committee. This is a group of people in the company that are going to sit around and sort of think about how do they continually change their IP to get the maximum return. Now, what this means is the strategy committee sort of becomes the new type of talent you need in the company, an IP holding company or an IP company, is that phrases like COO and CTO and things like that really don't seem to matter in an IP company. The next thing we do is to make sure that we can organize the IP education and best practices. We have 50 different podcasts here in Invent Anything that might be a good beginning for this, because there's lots of different ways to create IP, use IP, license IP, etc. So you could look at the last 50 podcasts we do as best practices for starting an IP company. By the way, there's really nowhere in the world one can learn best practices like this. There's no college course, etc. So you really, when you start an IP company, you have to recognize that you're sort of starting from the beginning. So unless you have some particular skill like licensing or deal making or whatever, but that is what you start with. But you have to develop all this other stuff in order to make it sort of a best practice company. And I think a lot of IP companies that start fail because they don't recognize this. Another thing to do is to get a dedicated set of management team. And I would suggest that no matter what, you need some inventors, some attorneys, some deal people, and some monetization experts, maybe some market expertise. And this is important. I've seen companies try to vendor this out, and it really doesn't work because you need to kind of have a small team to focus on this. On the other hand, in the early days of a company, vendoring this out is okay for an IP company, but you've got to get to the point, if you're going to be a really long-term company, of bringing that expertise in-house. Another thing about organizing an IP company, and I can't stress this enough, is that you want to develop your own IP tools, sophisticated IP tools, things like how to invent around patents or how to invent on top of them, or how to do valuation, et cetera, et cetera. These are all different things that you can use. They're your secret sauce, if you will, just like any company might have its technology platform or its algorithms or its composition of matters that nobody knows about when they're making formulas. So once again, I'll say that over years in IP Capital, the consulting practice I run, we have over 50 services that we have. We developed some really best practices in IP tools. I would think that IP tools would be different from one place to another. So let's just say that you have a lot of patents in the area of computer hardware. You might develop sophisticated AI tools that help you analyze patent claims to see if it reads on specific hardware in the patent spec. Whereas another IP company might focus on environmental, engineering stuff, where their tools might be specific to that technology area. In organizing an IP company, I can't stress enough having a really good legal expertise on the team or access to it. A lot of times an IP company might get access to one of the top firms to do some work, and get access to other legal firms to do patent prosecution. They would get access to other legal firms like those that might do licensing, etc. So they might break apart their legal expertise and try to team them as if they're a virtual resource or a real resource. One of the things that always happens, and I can tell you this is a major headache of an IP company, is that you start to develop enough patents where it becomes a full-time job to essentially look at the patents and the provisionals and the office actions and where they're going to be and what you have to do and how much it's going to cost. So generally, an IP company literally has to start developing a patent portfolio manager, and that becomes a full-time job. It might become a full-time job for 2 or 3 people. When you get from 100 to 200 patents, all of a sudden you find that you might need 1 or 2 people to do this. Some companies have 15 to 20 patents to get started with, so you don't need a patent portfolio manager, but as you grow, you certainly do. One of the things that's vital, no matter how many patents you have, is to develop a market analysis team. Now here, an experience with We did IP capital licensing as a company for 4 or 5 years. We're doing our hundreds of deals. We basically had some people that were really good at looking at patents and understanding where the patents are at in the market. Other people were really good at trying to figure out what the value of the patents would be and how much the royalty rates would be, et cetera. And other people would be very specialists in knowing who to talk to in the market to license or sell patents. So this market analysis team might have 3 or 4 different aspects to it, but it's fundamental to have someone dedicated to finding the right deals, knowing how to size the deals, and knowing which patents are in those deals. Now, when I use the word patents, I mean patents and trade secrets here generally, because the more trade secrets you have, the more you can leverage patents. And of course, there's a podcast you can go to on how patents get leveraged by trade secrets and vice versa. Another thing you clearly need in organizing an IP company is a licensing and monetization team. Different than the marketing team, the licensing and monetization team are the ones that go on the road or provide the presentations. They have to have combinations of skills, like technical, legal, and market built into one person that can drive a deal. They also need to know how to do negotiation and generally sophisticated enough to do it on the fly. Some people are great at this. There's not that many people, though, that are great at this. So finding that right person to do the deal for monetization is vital. We mentioned valuation, but I would say that one of the things is to have people that really know how to value patents correctly. It's embarrassing to go out and try to do licensing or selling patents and not really know what the price expectation could be. Asking for billions when the patent might be worth millions is just not going to help anybody. On the other hand, downrating the value of a patent to settle for something for $250,000 and $500,000 when the patent really should be worth several million is another mistake that's made. So valuation experts. There's a podcast on how to do patent valuation. I was just on the phone today with the company, talk about patent valuation, how they can raise money using patent valuation. So certainly another core skill in organizing an IP company is valuation expertise. And the last one I'll mention is building an IP network. I have been surprised over the last 20 years about how many different people in the IP sector know how many different things. There are people that are experts on literally anything from how to get a better trade secret, to how to keep track of the trade secret, to how to leverage a trade secret, people that know how to sell copyrights, people that know how to sell patents, some people that know how to invent around patents, some people have access to capital, some people have access to pools and so on, and some people who know how to go manage press releases, etc. There's a world out there. So building a global network of IP assistance is very important, and I would suggest that you develop it as you need it. I would suggest that every time you get stuck about moving your IP company forward and organizing it, that you sort of think about there must be somebody out there that I can contact, that I can vendor or use part-time to help me get started. So building an IP company is sophisticated. It's a lot of fun. And it has a lot of parts, but don't expect it to build it overnight. It's going to take several months to even know what you're going to try to do. And then it's going to take years to slowly get to the point where you're an effective IP company. Let's jump over to topic number 4. Now that we've got our IP company in place, what would be some strategies? Now, I can tell you that we could spend hours and hours on this topic because every IP company may have a unique IP business model with a unique hybrid strategy of business models. And because of that, they would have a unique IP strategy. Also, though, the domain that they're in, I mentioned computer hardware versus environmental engineering versus cell phones. They would each have separate strategies. Depending upon the business model and the hybridization of that business model and the technology space that it's in, there's also the strategy of what to deal with, how to raise money, in order to keep the company going while it's not yet making money. So I'm going to hit on some of the things that might be very useful for starting an IP strategy of an IP company. The first basic IP strategy, fundamental, is how do you expand your patent portfolio. There are some companies that don't get this, but they literally think that the way to expand their portfolio is to buy patents. It works for a while, but you quickly find out that you're buying patents more expensively than how you can value them and get the return on them, because it's expensive to keep patents in force. And how do you get really good at buying the right patents? If you spend so much time trying to buy the right patents, you'll never get into business. You have to start buying. So knowing how to develop patents is incredibly important. I remember in some on-demand transportation companies when they first got started, where their valuations was in tens and tens of billions, they had no patents. Unfortunately, they didn't develop portfolios, so they had to go out and buy patents very expensively. But eventually they developed a program internally to develop their own patents. But that wasn't an IP company. That was a real on-demand transportation company. So if you're an IP company, it's even worse, because the only way you're going to make money is through selling or licensing or monetizing your IP. So I would suggest tools like invention on demand or inventing around or inventing on top of are all valuable patent portfolio expansion tools as one of the key IP strategies of an IP company. And luckily, we have podcasts that you can listen to on that. One of the things that's also important as a basic IP strategy for an IP company is regular portfolio reviews. Now, when I mean regular, I mean weekly. In the companies that I've run over the years, there's some weekly meetings I have. I have a weekly meeting on my cash. I have a weekly meeting on my client list and the work we're doing, fundamental to driving the business, the heartbeat of the business. So likewise, an IP strategy for an IP company is managing your portfolio almost weekly. What decisions you have to make to put more money in or stop something or make some IP better is a weekly chore. One of the great IP strategies for an IP company is strategic partnerships. I mentioned this earlier, but there's so many relationships out there that can help you propel the value of your IP company. So I would suggest you can't do this alone. I've been doing this for 20 years, advising companies. Almost every day I learn about a new sort of IP expertise or IP strategic partner. So they're out there. So I would suggest that you look at the world and sort of think about how your IP company, using your IP business model in your technology space, can be leveraged through strategic partnerships. One of the things that's really key as a basic strategy for an IP company is to stay aloof. Now, by this, I mean that you don't go out there and broadcast that you're going to be a litigation company. That's the last thing you want to do, because the first thing anyone's going to do when they look up your company is to read your website. And if you're about litigation, then you're going to be very hard to open up the door to have business discussions to a company that may be violating your patents. And so staying aloof is important. We helped a company that grew $1 billion valuation, and you could not tell from its website what it did. Its idea of keeping everything trade secret and buttoned up until their portfolio got announced was vital to them. We've worked with companies that are microcaps or small companies that have literally gained billions of dollars of valuation by actually staying very, very secretive until they actually act. So there's no reason that your IP company should be broadcasting what it does, unless it's, of course, the business model like an IP consulting practice or services. You certainly do want to broadcast that, but in most cases, being secretive is one of the natures of an IP company. One of the things about an IP company, and this is really big, that is that one of the strategies is you have to develop technologies to do watching patents that are being issued by others, watching someone who may be interested in monetizing patents. Many of the deals that I've done where we've had portfolios that want to license or sell, we hadn't recognized that we went in the door to sell, they were opening the door to buy. So developing sophisticated watch techniques and web crawlers and things like that could be very, very useful for an IP company. Which leads to the next one, which is an IP strategy for an IP company should be AI. So today, in fact, we're developing a lot of AI robots to do lots of things to make us more efficient, to do it with more accuracy at lower cost. The ability to write AI robots in any company is skyrocketing with large language models, ChatGPTs and Claudes, et cetera. So I'd highly recommend, if you're thinking about an IP company, think about the great benefits of having AI robots running a lot of the stuff that used to take people. And you can do it faster, cheaper, better, and at higher quality. And it's so exciting to think that so many companies today can be IP companies if they simply consider the ability to have these AI robots helping them do it. Which leads to the next point, which is using these AI robots and web technology can be literally used to create added value. They can create patents quicker, better value claims. You can add value enhancements to all the things that you're doing using these AI robots. Another overall strategy of an IP company is, since it's based upon patents, and patents' sole use legally is to stop others from making or selling, it's important to be litigation ready. So developing litigation expertise or those relationships is vital. Another strategy that's basic is patent monetization. We talked about licensing, we talked about litigation, but there's lots of deals to do, JVs and universities and all sorts of things that you can do. So developing those strategies for patent monetization is really important. And finally, another strategy for an IP company is financial engineering. You've got to get good at raising money. You've got to get good at using other people's money. You've got to get good at doing deals. So developing sound financial engineering and the ability to raise money and play with and use equities or debt is vital in an IP company. So coming up, you'll learn about the roles of prototypes in IP monetization and the various benefits of that. You'll learn how prototypes can enhance the monetization, validate market interests, help you form spin-offs, help you showcase your IP to investors, and attract all sorts of other attention from a network. Collaborative prototypes are also very good for demonstration, for early partnerships, and revenue generation. We're also going to learn about the additional benefits of an IP company, including, but not limited to, how you can change business models, how you can use legal protection from the upfront to raise the value of a company, how you can use IP companies to give you diverse revenue streams. We're going to learn about the advantages of various monetization opportunities, and we're going to talk about the fundamental of an IP company, which is to raise the asset valuation. And finally, we're going to talk about things like how to negotiate for leverage and how to do risk reduction and the potential for significant gains in an IP company. So stay tuned. So topic number 5, monetization and prototypes. The first thing to talk about is that on podcast number 49, leveraging your IP with prototypes, take a listen to that, because that will go into deep into how that's done. We are going to mention some cliff notes here in topic number 5, but also talk about some different things too. Next thing about prototypes in monetization, we have found, because we've been monetizing patents for decades now, is that prototypes seem to be the way that seems to really help in monetizing. When you have prototypes, you'll find that it's easy to discuss the patents or the trade secrets because it shows others how something works. And they're sort of as focused on building a business from the patents in your license versus just owning the patents and going forward. The third thing about monetizing in prototypes is how you can do collaboration. That is to say that when you have prototypes, it's much easier to talk to people without the threat of litigation because they're looking at the prototype thinking, I could build that or I could use it. So collaboration seems to be something that comes right out of a prototype versus patents. Another thing about prototypes is that it provides market validation. Showing someone how a prototype works is really showing them that the product will work, which is really showing them that the market could work. Putting it in their hands will give them a great way to know that this could be done in the market. So if you can see it, then you might be more apt to buy or to license it. One of the nice things about doing monetization, we're using prototypes for IP, is that that really helps to do spin-off companies. You can really hand the prototype off as well as the IP and let someone take the company. One of the great things about prototypes is that you can help investors to see how the patents work. Investors are not going to read patents and generally try to understand claims. But if you're showing a prototype, they'll get it. One of the great things about monetization with prototypes is there's a firm connection between the patent and the prototype. So there's this great overlap. And that will allow you to do different things like bring it to trade shows or bring it in a licensing or a patent sale demonstration or create videos of it. So it really, really helps in order to allow one to see the value. Another thing about patents and monetization for prototypes is that technical demonstrations are clearly the way to discuss the patents to technical people. Generally, in a monetization for patents, you have to talk to business, technical, and legal. Well, bringing a patent in to talk to technical people is very difficult. Bringing in a prototype is not. So prototypes based upon patents is essential sometimes to talk to technical people. They can't say it's not going to work if they see it working. Another thing about prototypes is it's a blast when you're doing prototypes because you can certainly get a lot of media and PR attention by doing videos or commercials basically on your prototype. And finally, doing prototypes for monetization, royalty financing is one thing that you can do. So when you're trying to develop royalties from your license, having a prototype means that who's ever going to license the patents could start immediately with the prototype. So royalties could start immediately because royalties are only going to start when, in fact, the product's produced. So by showing the prototype, you can really assist that it works. If they take a license, they're required really to go from prototype to product in a certain amount of time. Where most patent licenses, they'll take a patent license only based upon the sale of the product, which could take forever. So let's get into topic number 6, the benefits to consider. One of the first benefits to consider is it's a change in your business model. You may have been a product or service company. Maybe the company hasn't made money, but having an IP company, man, that could start to give you a whole new way of looking at your company to change its business model. Another benefit is what I call the legal sword or the shield. As soon as you go to starting an IP company, you start thinking about reality of using your patents and litigation. Sometimes patents and litigation can be used as a sword to go make money or to really do transactions or you sue them. In other cases where you're trying to do some work with customers or suppliers, now you can use this as a shield because you can sort of be talking to companies about transactions, but not be worried about being sued because you don't have any products. You just have patents. And that's one of the key benefits of an IP company. It's very likely that you could be sued, not with the product company. Another benefit of an IP company is it has great revenue possibilities. In other words, you can, if you have 30, 40 patent families, each one of them is a separate royalty licensing opportunity. And I have seen this over the years, having specific revenue lines associated with certain patent families. The other thing about this is, and let's be clear, in a patent licensing model, it's an annuity. So once the license is done, you get paid every year or every quarter. What businesses do that without doing new work, right? So if someone takes a patent license, basically they're going to embed it into their product, and more than likely that license is going to go for years. One of the things about benefits of a patent IP company is competitive advantage. When you establish a strong IP portfolio, that gives you a dominance in the market. And now you can hold up your company as an IP company. A lot of companies might do a sophisticated strategy where they keep the product company but start an IP holding company. Here they're bifurcated out the IP company as a separate entity that licenses the product company, but the IP holding company can go off and separately license to other markets. So it's a way of kind of making money on your patents multiple ways. Another benefit of IP companies is the monetization opportunities are just out of this world in terms of the variation you can do. I mean, any kind of a deal you could cut. You could license your IP to get access to a laboratory. You could license out your IP to trade, to get access to some technology or to have some products delivered to you. You could do IP licensing in order to exchange it for public stock. You could use IP licensing and IP sales for pretty much any kind of transaction you can imagine. And that's not true of most things that you have in a product company. One of the nice things about an IP company is one of the benefits is asset valuation. It's very rarely that you can increase the value of your IP in a product company, but an IP holding company, that is where the value is coming from. So you can go from one raise to the next simply by saying you developed 20 patents in the last 6 months. So that's why your raise went from one number to another. So another benefit of an IP company is what I call market intrigue, which means that until you're ready to spring the trap, you're in stealth mode. Keeping things kind of secret for a while is really important in an IP company because this silence all of a sudden can bring a lot of attention once you've kind of determined your model and put it out there. And that's a leverage point. It's kind of like your go-to-market strategy. You really want to be silent. I have seen companies that try to slowly bake, what they're doing, but I found this idea of just coming out as a surprise produces a lot of value very quickly. We mentioned negotiation leverage. Intellectual property is great to leverage in a negotiation because there's always a threat of litigation, and you can use it for mergers, for partnerships, for acquisitions. They give you a strong bargaining position. Another thing about IP companies is it's really risk management. You can't get sued generally. There's very, very rarely. And these IP assets can be used to help others mitigate business risk. You can literally be licensing IP to others so they don't have the risk of being sued. You could sell IP to them so they can use IP to lower their risk by suing someone else, etc. And finally, the last thing about the benefits of an IP company, it's a lottery ticket. It could be a lottery ticket to billions of dollars. You put in $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, and who knows, that company could be worth billions. Right now, there's a number of companies I'm working with that have invested maybe 6 or 7 million, and the last investor puts in a couple million, but there's a lottery ticket to billions of dollars. So yes, there's a monetization path, but the ability to have a litigation settlement is huge. So let's wrap up. In topic number one, we talked about what is an IP company, and we characterized it by substantial allocation of resources, maintaining a comprehensive patent portfolio of trade secrets and patents, generating revenue primarily through the monetization of IP, generally in specific markets, forming intellectual property strategic relationships, driving your competitive advantage with IP. We also talked about the significant investments in R&D you need to do to get a stream of royalty, but the R&D is how to become an IP company, not necessarily products. We even talked about protecting your IP portfolio as a top priority. We talked about things like active litigation and strategic management of IP and how to do regular assessments of your IP. Even talked about doing that very frequently. We talked about safeguards of how to do this by maintaining your IP and even at some point keeping your company, secretive at some level. We also talked about how this really helps for things like strategic partnerships and negotiation and bargaining tools, and how this has a really neat enhancement for investors. So what is an IP company? If you're making that decision, there's a lot there in adding value to your company from wherever you're at to becoming an IP company. This led to topic number two, which is the types of IP company business models. We talked about how you could do patent licensing as a revenue generator. We could talk about how you could be a patent troll, which focuses on litigation. We talked about micro litigation. We talked about tech transfer. We talked about IP trading and brokerage. We even talked about things like IP funds and IP-rich startups. We talked about things like patent pools and standard essential patents. We even talked about things like IP consulting services and IP financing. So there's a lot of different business models, and we ended it by saying, you could hybridize these things and have very sophisticated models. As a matter of fact, if you're thinking about an IP company, maybe you invent your own business model. We then went to topic number three, which is now that you know what the business model is going to be, you can organize your IP company. Here we talked about, starting off with a strategy committee for IP and not the COO and CTO, very different type of company. We talked about how important it was to have IP best practices in education. It's hard to get this education. Over the 50 podcasts that we have done in Invent Anything can help you along that way. We talked about ways that you could establish and focus on developing strong teams, but we also talked about patent portfolio management, looking at patents and maintaining them and making decisions on almost a daily basis. How many more patents to file? Should you abandon this patent or not? We also talked about how it's really important to have very strong legal expertise, either in-house or external counsel, and whether you want IP help on litigation or patent prosecution or building licensing, models and licensing. These are all different legal expertises. We talked about having a market analysis team to help you understand trends and where to get in, et cetera. We talked about things like having people focused and specializing in negotiation skills. We even talked about how to have valuation expertise as a key part of an IP company. And finally, we talked about building up a global network of IP professionals to assist you with some of the things that you might not have. Thinking about organizing an IP company, it's very different than a regular company, product or service company, but it's very leveraged by bringing in outside expertise. The fourth thing we talked about was having an IP strategy for an IP company, and there's some basics. We talked about patent expansion as being a critical tool. We talked about how to form strategic partnerships with things like academic institutions or large companies. We talked about secrecy and how to stay aloof. We talked about technology watches. We talked about how, following using AI robots to do things like CRM outreach programs, or how to use AI and web crawlers to build your own AI tools, or, building a patent holding company. If you sort of think about it, you can do robots to help you do valuations, or robots to help you find companies to monetize to. You could use robots to help you figure out what patents to create. You could use robots to do all sorts of things. Finally, we talked about that all the IP companies that we work with over time really needs a basic strategy in knowing how to do financing. Financing is very creative, whether you're going to finance as a public or private company, whether it's going to be equity or debt, whether you're financing for the round or financing for the whole company's portfolio, whether you decide to bifurcate your IP into different companies and finance those separately, how to finance a litigation, how to finance a licensing team. So there's tons of different business models but also tons of different financing strategies for those business models. Next, as we talked about the world of prototyping, we started off by saying, podcast 49, you can actually listen to how podcast specifically deals with how prototypes can help monetization. But we did get into some very specific things in this topic. We talked about how prototypes can give you market validation. We talked about how that will help a licensee or someone who purchases it. If they can see it, they're more likely to buy it or license it. We talked about how prototypes help with a spin-off company. You can literally deliver the license or the patents and the prototype. We talked about how you can display prototypes in press releases and videos to help you do the licensing of patent sales, even taking it to trade shows. We talked about how prototypes help with the technical demonstrations, because we talked about any monetization is going to involve, technical, business, and legal, and the legal needs to be convinced, and what a better way to do that than the prototype. We also talked about media and PR relationships and the leverage you can get by showing how the prototype works. And we also lastly talked about how you can do prototypes to speed up your royalty collections. Because a lot of times when you license IP or sell it, when you license IP, you're not going to get royalties until the product is going to be sold. So what happens is providing a prototype will speed up, the requirement that they have just such a long time to turn into a product. Where by not doing that, the company that you license to could take years to develop the product before they start the license. Finally, we talked about the benefits to consider starting an IP company. One of the key things is, whatever company you have right now where you're considering an IP company, the IP company by definition will be a change of your business model. And that can be fun and rewarding and provide some flexibility, especially to your investors who have no options if they're thinking about shutting the company down. But presenting an IP holding company or an IP company, as examples of how you can start an IP company might be very useful to give your investors optionality. We talked about how the company can generate multiple revenue streams, where each patent family could be a revenue stream. We talked about the competitive advantage you get by enabling your market dominance by continually building more and more IP. I mean, if one company's developing products in the space, it has 10 patents, but you're just sitting there developing patents and patents and patents to the hundreds. All of a sudden, you're going to have IP dominance. Most companies can't get market dominance. An IP company absolutely has the ability to get dominance as one of its strategies. We talked about how you can go from one valuation to the next simply by generating more patents. In other words, the use of funds is to generate more patents. And then you can change the valuation, maybe going from a $30 million valuation to a $20 million to a $50 million valuation simply by creating patents. Very hard to do that in a regular company, raising money 6 months or 9 months spaces, raising valuation. Patents, you can do that. One of the things we talked about is the significant advantage, a benefit of negotiation. When you have an IP company, you can play a significant card in negotiation because you have the IP, which gives you the ability to stop somebody else from using or selling the technology or the product. So it's a very strong negotiation tool. And finally, we talked about that if everything's the same, investing in an IP company is like taking a lottery ticket, because somewhere along the line, that IP could turn into a litigation which could be worth hundreds of millions, if not billions. Or it could be the very reason why someone acquires a company. We've talked about this throughout some of our podcasts, but if you were to plot the M&A value on the y-axis versus the number of patents in the x-axis, and if you went and found deals like this particular company was acquired for 32 million and had 3 patents, and this one was acquired at 75 million and had 6 patents, etc. If you plug in all those dots and put a trend curve through that, you'll find there's a hockey stick up around 20, 30 patents, maybe even 15. So you can incredibly raise the valuation from 2 or 3x EBITDA, from 2 or 3x revenue, 10 or 15x EBITDA, up to 20, 30, 40, 50x revenues. So think about that. By investing in an IP company or starting an IP company, you have the ability to not only have a great company on generating royalties from an IP company, but you can play this lottery. And sometimes that's the difference between a company being purchased for hundreds of millions or not, or winning a large litigation. So I hope you like this. It's certainly a very different one about what is an IP company and all the things needed to start it and to build it and some of the benefits. So if you like this, please subscribe and join our blog on Invent Anything, and also come listen to us on our series Invent as It Worked. This is John Cronin from Invent Anything.